Great. All right, guys. Well, I want to welcome back my hero, Dan Sullivan. I was just talking to my team about, I always get a little nervous when Dan's on because he's just such a captivating individual. And I want to make sure we use great use of his time. But Dan is a visionary and innovator, gifted conceptual thinker. He's got over 40 years experience as a highly regarded speaker, consultant, strategic planner, and coach to entrepreneurial individuals and groups. But Dan is the reason he's my hero because he's been my coach, and I've worked with Strategic Coach, I think 6 years now. And I just want to welcome you, Dan. So thanks for joining me on the show.
Yeah, well, Regan, I have to tell you, this is an interesting time to be doing a podcast right now. And it'll come out sooner or later, but I'll be 76 next week. And I have to tell you that in my lifetime so far, I think this is kind of one of the biggest events of my lifetime. You know, I mean, there's things that would happen in your country, and you know, there's been wars, there's been economic turndowns, but I can't remember one that seemed to be common topic for any conversation going around the entire world.
Yeah, it's been phenomenal how far-reaching it is, and you know, virtually nobody has been insulated from this. It's on the top of everybody's mind. And so, what would you say differentiates this from, like, you know, like the Korean War or Vietnam or some of those other...
It's the physical lockdown. I've never experienced a physical lockdown. My mother was born in 1910, and her family, and she with her family was quarantined for 3 months during the Spanish flu. So the Spanish flu was 1918 to 1921 in some part of the world, not constant in one part of the world, mostly in North America and Europe. And so they didn't go out of the house they couldn't go out of the house or come into the house. Nobody could come into the house for 3 months. And so that's the only, experience that I knew about where there had been a shutdown, there had been a kind of lockdown we experienced, but it wasn't everybody. It was certain people who had symptoms. They had to do that. And it was very interesting. I asked her when she was 75, she died when she was 87, but I asked her, we went to Italy when we were 75. I took her on a trip because she always wanted to talk about going to Italy. And I said, better get it in. So I took her, and we had a lot of conversations about her life when she was young, which generally you don't necessarily know about your parents. And but I asked her what was the biggest change that happened after those 3 months. She said, we immediately got a telephone. And they hadn't gotten a telephone. And I was looking at, I just went back and said growth of use of telephone. And it shot up right around 1920, you could see. And I bet a lot of people had the experience, got to be able to talk to people, So I think Zoom is the equivalent of the telephone these days.
Yeah, I mean, think about how many people have adopted Zoom or some other virtual platform. It's been crazy. That's what we've seen in our clinics too, is people who used to tell us, like, oh, I don't like technology. I don't want to, I'll just drive in, even though they're driving 2 hours for appointments. Now they're like, I'm happy to get on Zoom. What do I do? And so it has forced people to look at technology differently.
Yeah, I think the only thing superior to using Zoom during these days is owning the stock.
Yes.
I mean, 1st of March, they had 10 million daily users. And a couple of weeks ago, I looked, it was 300 million. So they've gone 30 times in 6-7 weeks. And I said, that's growth.
That is massive growth.
Yeah, that's growth, yeah.
And how is this impacting your life overall? I mean,
well, I was used to Zoom, and so I had the podcast that I started doing very actively and very, very concentratedly, probably 5, 6 years ago. So Zoom's just a good way of doing it. And surprisingly, the audio speakers have really picked up great. So this, usually you would have to have a microphone next to you to doing, but they're apparently our tech people say it's really great, the audio that's coming, just you and I having this conversation. So the technology wasn't the issue. The first challenge we had is that our team had to, switch to home, being remote. And but that only took about 2 days. And so we had over 100, we have 100 worldwide. So from London, England on the east to Los Angeles on the west. So we have 8 time zones. So we all had to switch within about 2 days, and that was done. And then we wanted to immediately reestablish contact with our entrepreneurs. And it took us about 10 days from shutdown. So it's the 13th of March. And then I think on the 23rd, we had our first 2-hour mini workshop. And I've done 20 so far. So I've done 20 so far. And then on June 1st, for June, July, and August, we're putting it in the calendar that it's going to be Zoom, because, some jurisdictions will be back before that, but so, if it's half and half, we'll stick with Zoom until it's, people have 100% choice one way.
Right.
But we feel that probably there's going to be people who come from afar. This is going to be their new coach. This is going to be the new form of coach. And we did one with Australians about 3 weeks ago, and it was great. It was great. And we had about 16, and they loved it. And, it's a 5-day turnaround. If they come to Toronto or Chicago, it's basically 5 days from the time they leave till the time they get back. So this is really big for them. I've got clients in Hong Kong, Singapore, India, Dubai.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to see a real adjustment. They've adjusted, but they won't come back to the live. But it's in the last 2 weeks, Regan, I've had a lot of people say, I love Zoom and I love the crispness of it. I love but there's something missed in the socialization that happens in person, and they're starting to say, I want both. So even if you come to your live workshop, we're going to have a 2-hour something every month for between your workshops. So we're going to probably have 3 2-hour sessions for everybody, and then lots of other dates. If you can't make your date, then you can drop in on another date. So real shift, it's real shift.
Yeah, it's been fun because some of my friends in Strategic Coach, we've been meeting together, just doing some mind sharing. And then at the last workshop that you put on that was about 2 hours long, you broke us off into groups so we could still have dialogue with each other. And it was fun. I enjoy it, but I do miss the live in-person events. We missed the lunch. We all decided that we do miss the food that you feed us there is pretty spot on. So it's something to be missed. And what would you say people's biggest concern is in your community? I mean, as far as the entrepreneurs go, what are they working through?
Well, first of all, so I only coach the 10 times and the free zone. So that's about 20% of the total number of entrepreneurs. So I've only got it by other people's reports. At the 10 times level, and I would say that about 80% of the 10 times, I'm aware that they were on one of the calls. There's some people who just disappeared, and we haven't really made contact with them. So I don't know what the story is there. I would say uniformly very positive, even if they got really hit. Some people are having record months. You know, there's, depending on the business and industry that you're in, they're really doing extremely well. And so I think that's mixed, how well they're doing. But whether it's not acceptable to complain and bitch on a strategic coach workshop call or not, but I think uniformly they've been enormously positive.
Yeah.
And a lot of them seeing that they're able to make some changes during this period that they've contemplated for years, but they said under ordinary circumstances might take 5 years what we're pulling off in 3 months. So I think it's but I would say compared to any other group of people on the planet, ours is heads and shoulders above from a positive standpoint.
Yeah, it's a breath of fresh air, and that's what I've seen in the group is we've all innovated much quicker. I mean, I look at this and I said it's like a gift that the universe gave to us, and it said, okay, Regan, you've got to start bringing in more virtual clinics, and you've wanted to do this forever, and so now it just forced me right into action. Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you, your tools have been phenomenal, just for my thinking, and you know, part of it is not just, you know, how I'm thinking and feeling about it, but also, you know, I've got about 30 employees and 30 team members, and how can I keep them engaged? I've got 125 members in my Go Wellness community, and trying to keep those healthcare entrepreneurs, you know, keep the right mindset. And so I used your scorecard, the mindset scorecard, and I sent it to Babs. I don't know if she showed it to you, but I did 8 mindsets, and then
Oh yeah, no, I read it with great interest. Thanks for reminding me, because you know, I said when I see him, I'm going to tell him. I thought it was terrific. I thought the mindset scorecard was terrific.
Well, it was. I appreciate that. It was fun to write because, you know, I don't know. You know, I found myself going into some of the psychological depths where you're just like, are we ever going to get through this? And this, you know, starts to feel heavy, and you start reading the news reports, and you can get caught up in all the, you know, the political drama behind it. But then I was like, all right, I got to snap out of it. And then you came to mind. I was like, all right, what would Dan do? I said, well, Dan would probably start thinking about his thinking. And so what's a tool I could use to think about my thinking? And I just basically wrote my own psychology there and had a therapy session.
No, it was great. There's a book there. There's a book there.
Yeah. Yeah, we are working on that whole process too. So
no, I always start each one of my books with a mindset scorecard. I mean, I actually include them in the book. So
yeah, I think it's brilliant. And you're writing a book a quarter.
Yeah, a book a quarter, and this quarter I got in too, because we pulled off the shelf an old 4-pager that I had done right after 9/11. Which is called the Scary Times Success Manual. It's just 10 strategies, you know, forget about this, focus on this. And it was a big hit back in 01, right after 9/11. And then 08, 09, when the subprime, when we had the, you know, the market crash and the economic downturn, it went out there. And it basically doubled in downloads that we could account for. So I think in 01, right after 9/11, we hit about 1.5 million people, you know, where we had knowledge that this had been downloaded. And then in 08, 09, it was about 3 million. And I think we're up about 5 or 6 million now with the downloads. So we decided to, you know, kind of go deeper with it. So we've taken 4 pages and we've turned it into an actual book. Looks like, you know, it'll look like one of our quarterly books, a little bit longer because it's got 10 strategies. And then we've done really deep dive podcasts for Shannon Waller and I on each of the sections. And so we're actually thinking about going to a online subscription program for this and getting it out, you know, to the world. That I think the scary times that we're experiencing right now is just the first of a lot of scary times that are coming. This
Mhm.
one's unique because it was medical, you know, it was health. We haven't
Right.
had that big a scare, but I think enormous number of things are going to be shifting right now. And, um, you know, a lot of conspiracy theories right now. And I said, I don't believe in conspiracies because I don't think human beings are really that organized. And the other thing is, I don't think anybody can keep a secret. So there's two things that work against conspiracies. But, you know, the Chinese, this was like an act of war. And
Right.
there's an old quote from, yeah, I don't know who it was, but said, "Never attribute to malice what can be adequately explained by stupidity." And I think that China is just this big, unmanageable, ungovernable country, and something got out of hand, and they try. I do believe they tried to cover it up, but you know, where in politics in the world does that not happen all the time? You know, covering
Right.
up, and I think it just got out of hand. I think it was it's stupidity and incompetence that actually let this loose.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it spread much faster than it needed to because people are trying to save face.
Well, it's you know, it's a new kind of virus. I was talking to my intellectual property lawyer who is right in Palo Alto, you know, south of San Francisco. And he's got a lot of biotech firms, and he said 6 of them are working on vaccines. Vaccines are, you know, prevent, you know, whatever for viruses, and they have been since AIDS kicked in, you know, 40 years ago. So this has been a constant in the biotech industry that viruses, you know, can you come up with a universal virus vaccine? And he said that he thinks that they're really onto something because what it is, and you would know this, and it actually, I want to talk about this on the presentation. They find that pregnant women would get COVID-19, but their fetus would not,
Yeah.
and the babies would be born, and they even though they, you know, they were exposed to because of the mother, you'd think that they would be exposed, and they weren't. And uh, nobody mentioned, you know, there was just 5 or 6 reports about pregnant women
Yeah.
having COVID, but their fetus and then the baby not getting it. And I said, well, it's because of the killer cells that are in the placenta and the umbilical cord. You know,
Yeah.
baby killer cells. You know, they don't check ID.
They're, they're legit. Yeah, they will. They'll tackle that. So that's interesting you bring that up because I just interviewed Elliot Spencer for the show. Actually, this will be the next one that goes on. And one of the things he's doing is he's looking for mothers that tested positive for COVID. And then he's going to be testing the tissue for the antibodies as an antidote for, you know, to inoculate yourself from COVID.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because what they're doing now is they're not taking any birth tissue. They stopped in January until they can test all the tissue for COVID. And I think it's interesting because he was looking at the Mayo Clinic how they're using PRP from infected patients and infusing PRP, and then the patient builds up their own immunity against it. You create the antibodies, and he said, why not do that with birth tissue? And so that will be the next generation that he's hoping to have complete before the next, you know, probably this winter it'll come out again and we'll have another resurgence a little bit, hopefully not as bad, but that's another way that we can treat this thing.
Well, it's interesting because where they really got onto, you know, the work that you do with the stem cell, you know, yeah. I mean, I've been to your clinic twice, and we've gone through 2 treatments of stem cells using umbilical cord, and you're discovering that umbilical cord's value isn't just one thing; it's a lot of different things.
Right.
In the umbilical cord. But Peter Diamandis at one of the A360 he has a partner, and they have, kind of a stem cell thing that they're doing. And his name's Bob Harari. I don't know if you've come across that, Dr.
I
Bob
have met him.
Harari.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, and he said that the thing that really put them on to the fact that the stem cells that are in when babies are born, their placenta, the material around the placenta, and then also the umbilical cords, that they had surrogate mothers who had MS.
Mm-hmm.
And while they were carrying another woman's baby, they were carrying one. So there's no DNA connection, and there's no blood connection here. It operates as a completely separate system in the surrogate mother. But they went into remission of their MS while they were pregnant, and then as soon as the baby was born, their MS kicked in again.
Right.
And they said, it's so powerful that it'll actually help someone else. And my IP lawyer was saying that what they've discovered is that the killer cells of a 75-year-old are a bit lazy. They're
Right.
yeah. I mean, they're a bit. Mine, my normal is. Yeah, what's that coming along here? Well, I don't know. I don't think there's anything new anymore, Jethro. I don't think we have to worry about this one. Yeah. Look, he just waved at us. No, this is a friendly one. This is a friendly one. And I think it takes a while for 75-year-old killer cells to wake up to the fact that they're
Yeah, they just been attacked.
there's a
Yeah,
varmint. There's a varmint out there.
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
been interesting because one of the things we did with our whole team is we did stem cell IVs. So we got every single team member who wanted one. We said, look, this is what we're going to do, because we had to thin out the amount of patients that we've seen and not do some of the procedures that we typically would do. But so far no one got sick.
Yeah.
Primed everyone's immune system so they could recognize any threats.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we've learned a lot through this. And you mentioned, I mean, getting through it from a physiological perspective. What are you doing with your exercises? And
Oh yeah, well,
changed any of your routines?
I really picked up. I read an article about if you could just do one lifting exercise, make it squats.
Yeah.
And so I've always done sprints. The cardio has always been really good. As a matter of fact, this is very interesting for you. I'll tell something, then I'll go back to my lifting and my sprints. But pulse oximeter, if you have a pulse oximeter. So I was reading an article. Babs actually read the article to me, and she said this doctor who had been 45 years as a doctor and had retired, volunteered to go back to be a frontline worker in the hospital, not surgery, but he would be in the wards, and he would, deal with the people who had been brought in with COVID. And he said, but he had dealt with other viral outbreaks, not epidemics, but viral. Someone is down with a virus and everything else. And he says there's one thing that he always remembered, that if you did a pulse oximeter, and for those who don't know what that is, it's just a little thing. It's a little electric device. You put it on your finger. I use the middle finger, and about you can see it. It's kind of sensing, and then two things. It's called pulse because it shows you what your pulse is. But the other thing was it shows you how much oxygen you have in your cells. And he said that what he did when he got into the hospital, he brought his pulse oximeter with him, and they weren't even doing it in the hospital. And he said everybody he tested their oxygen in the cells on the pulse meter was, and you want it in the 90s, like you'd like to have your oxygen rating 95, 96. I've been 99 every day, so I'm pretty good. But he says everybody was below 60, and he said What he noticed is that when they had 50, you had to, you had to put them on a ventilator once they got below 50. And he says the virus is using up the oxygen. That's what's happening. But their carbon dioxide function is still working. So there's just as much oxygen being burnt. It's just that the individual is only getting 50% of it, and their cells are dying.
That,
Your cells are dead.
that's fascinating. So the carbon dioxide is still there. So the virus is just...
because the oxygen is still being consumed, but it's not being half of it's not being consumed by your body. It's being consumed by the invader.
Yeah, that is, I've not heard that. That is wild. I mean, because this is an RNA replicating virus. And so when it goes in there and it takes over the cells, then it's like, okay, we need oxygen too. But it's got its own agenda. Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, we just ordered one, and we were a little leery because they both came from China. I said, anyway, but we wiped it down,
Good.
So
pulled out the UV light and killed everything.
Yeah. But going back to the exercise routine, so I was just doing free weights, and I just started with 80 pound squats, and what I would do is I would work up to 20 in a row, and then I'd take it up 5 pounds, and I work to 20 in a row, and then 5 pounds. So I'm up on today's Wednesday. On Friday, I go to 120. So I've gone from 80 pounds to 120 with my squats in the last 6 weeks. And it's really great. I mean, I do it first thing, and I get my heart rate way up, and then I start the sprinting squats, and everything else. And so, you take care of your cardio, and there's about 8 different muscles that really get exercise when you do squats, starting. And so I'm always looking for the one exercise that, does a lot of different things, not just one thing.
Have you tried deadlifts as well?
Yeah, it's too slow for me though. I got ADD, deadlifts. Doesn't seem like I'm doing anything,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a different movement. Yeah. So, my son, Dominic.
Oh yeah.
He wants to really make the basketball team. And so now I got him on a very strict exercise routine. He's not going to school. My Zoe and Jonah, they're not going to school. So it's been really fun, but
best learning period of any child's life, not going to school.
That's true.
There's going to be a sudden upshoot of talent in the world now because the kids are not going to school. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it has been certainly we can customize what they're learning. We've been watching master classes. So, I mean, he's learning from Steph Curry how to shoot a basketball. I've got him doing squats and deadlifts and CrossFit style workouts, and then we're doing sprints. And yeah, it's actually been really good because it's gotten me more active, and I can actually get involved in their education. So.
He's probably good at anything he puts his mind to, though. He gave me the impression, I've had dinner with you guys a couple of times, and Dominic just strikes me as someone, when he puts his mind to something, he gets good at it.
He does, and it does not matter what it is. I mean, and he's someone who likes to learn lots of things, and so one week it's card tricks, and he'll just really spend enormous amounts of time learning card tricks. The next week it's skateboarding, and then it's he is. But right now he's putting his mind to basketball.
Yeah. For a future money-making activity, I'd stick to cards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's gonna. I've said, look, the NBA is just he keeps asking, do you think I could make it to the NBA? I'm like, no. I'm like, I just got to be straight up with you. You're 5'3" at 14. I don't think it's in your cards. Yeah. I agree. Cards would be better.
Thanks, yeah.
And so if you look at kind of the big things for the future,
Yeah.
you're a very future-oriented individual. As many of you know, Dan's got a goal to live to be 156, and so he's always just doing small things to move the needle. I mean, squatting is one of the best things you can do for your testosterone, which is one of those anti-aging hormones. It's great for growth hormone and just for all the physicality. I don't know of any other 75-year-old patients who are doing more than maybe a little air squat, maybe 2 inches down and 2 inches up. So that's impressive. Anything else that's been on your radar right now with longevity?
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, we're on a full supplement. We work with Dr. Jeff Gladden out of Dallas. And so I get, it's like typically when we get a blood draw, it's about every half year. And it's somewhere between 25 and 30 vials that they take. And then we get this extensive and pretty good. I mean, generally speaking, I'm the things that should be good are good. There's always, and the other thing is, even a blood draw is just a snapshot. It just kind of tells you, when it goes into the lab and they look at it, well, that's true right now. But a lot of it's really snapshot. And there's another person who's come into our life. His name is Mansour Mohammed, and he's a geneticist. You may have come across him.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
awesome.
And it's really, really interesting because just from a saliva sample of doing DNA, and all he can tell is what your parents gave you. He can identify who your parents were just out of the DNA. And it brought up a really interesting story. My mom and dad, they lived into their 80s, and they were married about, more than, I think, 55 years they were married. It never struck me that they were friends until the last 5 years of their life. They kind of got married for traditional reasons. You got married, and if you're a man, you found a woman and you got married, and it was farm. The background is farming. Yours was ranching, but the background was farming. And kids are very important. That's free labor. The one thing you can reduce to nothing is labor costs with a big family. And so I'm one of seven. I'm the fifth of seven. And so anyway, but it always struck me, and I've always been kind of observant of whether people get along with each other, they don't get along with each other. And not from an emotional standpoint, but just it struck me fairly early that being an adult was really a complicated business. I mean, it was presented in the movies and novels like adults really have their act together, but it always struck me very early that being an adult wasn't that easy, And so when on that same trip that I talked to my mother, where she talked about the flu epidemic, I asked her the question. I said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Why'd you marry Dad?" And she said, and it was really revealing. She said, well, she said, my family, it was not physically, we weren't a strong family. She's one of seven. My father was one of nine. And she said she had two sisters who died of TB, tuberculosis, which was a big problem early in the 20th century. It was a really, really bad problem. But there was just weakness. And my mom wasn't real strong. And she said, when I met my dad, she said, when I met him, he just seemed like the strongest person I ever met. My dad was just physically incredibly strong, and and tons of energy. And she said, I figured that if I married him, the children would be strong.
Wow.
Yeah.
So a biological choice.
Yeah, it's what do we call it? Genetic engineering. It was a project in genetic engineering. But my dad was a really hard worker, and he was a great provider. But not really apparent. I can't remember my father ever taking me aside and telling me anything about anything, about what you're saying. But my mother was very good at that. And I said, well, what about parenting? And she said, well, the priests and the nuns will take care of that. We're grew up Catholic. And she said that, so she, it was who, not how, she had, she had figured he's going to provide the genes, they'll provide the direction. And what really struck me, I said, I bet this has been true throughout human history, that people make choices for reasons like this, So anyway, when I got my results back and I had, consultation with Dr. Mansour Mohammed, he said, can I ask you a question? He says, are you planning to live a long time? He says, have you had thoughts of living a long time? And I said, yeah, I do. I didn't tell him the full plan. And he said, I want to tell you, your confidence is coming from your genes. He said, you have one of the strongest set of genes I've ever seen. So it's an interesting thing that maybe you're thinking about living long as really you're picking up on an internal capability.
Yeah. Oh, that is fascinating. I've never heard you frame it that way or talk about it that way.
Yeah.
So there's a new test that one of my mentors, Ryan Smith, he's in the peptide world, great scientist. They have a new test that goes beyond telomeres that can give you your true age. So it's called True Diagnostics, and they just released it last month. And it shows there's 8,500 methyl groups that can attach to your DNA that they can test. And then you can see which of your genes are actually expressing themselves, because genetic silencing is what we're trying to do in the cells so that they're not dying and go through their attrition. And he's discovered a way to actually test much more accurately the epigenetic factors that are turned on, and then they do the telomere lengths. So at one of these stages, he's sending me a bunch of kits, and I'm going to send you one. And I'd love to have you do that if you're open to it.
I'm a sucker for tests.
They're great. We need objective markers, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. In telomeres, there is some definite positive things.
Well, I had not been making much progress through lots of other therapies, but when I started with you, I've gone back 12 years since I started with you. I mean, I'm just doing paid by our sponsor message here, but this is a brief commercial message from the established method, but it was noticeable, and it showed up on my, because I do telomere tests other places, and it was going along, maybe it was 3 months, but when I first started my testing, my chronological age was, or my telomere age was older than my chronological age, and and then when I started the stem cell therapy, I went through the same testing I had been doing for the previous 3 years, and all of a sudden it was just backwards about 12 years, And they said, well, that's really interesting. No commentary, no champagne and everything. I said, 12 years. Does that happen a lot? And I said, well, these tests. And I said, no, yeah, but before you were telling me, well, these tests are really important, and now you're telling me these tests aren't important, so everybody's got a story.
Everybody's got a story. Well, that's exciting, and it's been a pleasure working with you and Babs. You guys are just dynamic couple. And I don't, biologically, you guys never decide. I mean, you knew you weren't going to have kids together, so
yeah.
So you asked your mother, and how many individuals are willing to admit that? Well, I just married your dad because he had good energy and good genes. I think that's very.
Well, it was refreshing.
That probably connected so many dots for you.
Well, the thing was that I always had a grown-up talking relationship with my mother, even when I was a kid, and when I was a kid, I went right for adults because I didn't think kids knew anything, and,
Mhm.
I mean, I never played with another person my age until I started first grade because it was a farm family, but I got four older ones. And
Mm.
then there's a big age drop with me, and then there's a 7 years. So I got 5 or 6 years on one side and 7 years. So I'm, kind of an only child in the middle of the big family. And so, what I was surrounded from by the time you start walking and talking was adults. And I figured out, that you could really keep adults going in a conversation if you just asked them questions about their experience. And,
Mhm.
coach, I mean, it took me 40 years to figure out how you get paid for this, but, I zeroed in. And when I went to first grade, then kids didn't have any stories. They didn't have any experiences to talk about. And but my mom, I zeroed in and zeroed in right away, and she was a talker. And if you have a little kid who's asking you questions about your experience, it's irresistible. It's kind of a charm. It's like a charming. Your son has that, by the way. Your son, Dominic, really has. I could spot it right off the bat. And I said,
Yeah.
here's another one. I told him but that was a year ago, and I said, I'd hire you right now, Dominic. Hire you right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and he keeps asking me, "Well, how much does Dan pay?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know, but you like that's the wrong question. Just go work for him.
Tell him go for
The
the
money will come, buddy."
don't bother with the money. Just go for the experience.
Exactly. Yeah. That's
That only
awesome.
work. That only works for a while, but
Right. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. But he has that interest. He has that interest in and I always saw that there was just this vast amount of interesting experience that adults had. And I grew up after the Second World War, and so there was Spanish flu epidemic, there was the Roaring Twenties, there was the Great Depression, there was the Second World War.
Yeah.
Just lots of fascinating experience that you could learn from. And I'm a history buff. I have a natural passion for history. So yeah, and we're in one of the great historic shifts right now. And we haven't been for 75 years. So in my own thinking and things that I've read is that for the last 75 years, it's been an American world, American financed world, American regulated world, American
Mm.
defended world. And now the US is coming back to home base, and America is going to take care of America. And but the rest of the world has gotten used to America doing the heavy lifting, and America isn't going to do the heavy lifting anymore. And nobody else is in a position to do the heavy lifting. So I think that there's going to be a lot of um, disruptions, scary times, uh, and the U.S. just decided to go back and fix up their own house.
Yeah, no, I think it's time. I don't know how you feel about it, but yeah, in reading the book you gave us, The Absent Superpower,
Yeah.
yeah, that was just a huge revelation on what we can do here in our own country and just keep it going.
Well, and where you live is one of the sweet spots of the universe. I mean, this is Peter Zion, the author that the absent, and he just came out with a new one, and everybody in 10 times is going to get a copy in the next month, and it's called Disunited Nations. And I spent about 6 hours with him at an event, somebody else's event, right at the end of February, and he said, this virus is going to speed things up about 5 years.
Wow.
And so he feels that the virus is actually China just falling apart politically. That
Mm.
the reason why this happened. He doesn't give China 10 years. He said he says modern China is entirely a creation of the United States. And the
Yeah.
United States just decided they weren't interested in doing the deal with China anymore. And so, yeah, I mean, it's time for the subject of another podcast, perhaps. But I said everything you got used to over the last 75 years, and I've been born. I mean, this agreement, it's called the Bretton Woods Agreement, which basically said the U.S. was going to take over the world, take care of the free world, because you had a big enemy in the Soviets, and we were going to create a prosperity wall around the Soviet Union. So, we would kill them we would defeat them with prosperity. So they just made everybody else prosperous, but not so much Americans. And so everything comes back.
Man, well, this is going to be an exciting adventure, and
Yeah.
And Dan, it's been amazing as usual. Always learn something from you. I love the way you think. I love the way you structure things. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this next evolution.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? How you're looking at it, though, from the standpoint? It seems to me that health has gone right to the middle. I mean, health was always there, but it wasn't the center of things. Economics was the center, technology was the center, politics was the center. But it seems to me that health has really, with this 2-month experience, has really gone to the center of things, and I think it's going to be there forever. Just from your perspective, because you're probably doing a lot of telemedicine right now. I mean, you're probably contacting, but do you see a very, very heightened awareness on the part of your and I think you probably have an unusually attentive client base, but do you see a jump up of their sense, we got to really do a lot more testing, we got to do a lot more strengthening than we had to do before?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we've learned the last 3 weeks, at least, is people want to be proactive about their health. And we generally work with people who are, somewhat skeptical of the system that's in place. But I think the best thing this will do is it's going to force people to look outside of the conventional model and start saying, man, there's so many great things we can do to create health. Why are we filling our bodies full of chemicals? Why don't we take more proactive steps? So I see that as the biggest mindset shift that will literally change things. And you mentioned we need someone in health. We've got to have more people who are aware of health in the political world. Obviously, after a pandemic like this, and so yeah, I'm just seeing that people are a lot more in tune with things they can do with their own bodies instead of waiting for the vaccine or waiting for the government to take care of them.
So let me ask you a question. What is now, I say there's 3 time periods. There's the old normal, there's the scary time period, and there's the new normal. So what's possible for you in your thinking and in your communication and ultimately in your action that will now be possible that would not have been possible 2 months ago?
Well, I think the biggest thing is I can now handle 10 times the amount of work on a webinar. So I do all of the initial consultations, the initial welcoming and orientation for people. So for all 5 of my clinics. And so it's easier for me now to add clinics. I can, connect with more people because they use technology, because my patient base is, 55 to 100, 102 to be exact. And so now I got more technology at my fingertips. And I also have a medical team, and they are now looking at the innovations that have come through COVID. And so I see them as saying they want to move medicine forward much faster. I think there's an urgency that this has created, and it's becoming infectious in the entire team. So I think those are a couple of the things that will be dramatically different and already are.
Yeah, I just have a new 10 times client who came into the free zone, and I think I've talked about him. He's the IVF doctor from
Yes.
Long Island.
Yeah.
Stephen Poulter, and he, immediately had to switch over to telemedicine, and it was really bad for the IVF business because it was deemed not to be an essential treatment. And and he says, well, from whose perspective? I mean,
Right.
everything like that. And and he was very active and in informing the political officials that there are people who are just not going to have a baby because they've missed their window here,
Mm.
and everything. But he said that the big thing that's happened during the COVID was that in a lot of jurisdictions, you did not get paid for telemedicine meetings with your patients, that the patient had to be live with you.
Right.
And he said, now this is a tremendous productivity jump, well, profitability and productivity jump at the same time. The same thing in the financial services is that you couldn't put a client's records on the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
So it was illegal for financial advisors and wealth managers to put their clients' private information on the cloud. And that's been lifted. So just those two major, finance and health are big industries.
Yeah, the other big thing in health is the state borders. So we can have no problem now. We don't have to worry about what state we're doing consultations in. It's just those have all been removed for now. So
Yeah,
it's making healthcare more accessible,
yeah,
which is exactly what we need.
yeah. I wonder if it's that that the progress that we'll be seeing in the next 6 months was a case that things are being given an opportunity to jump ahead, or that all the restraints that kept things back for the last 25 years have been taken away. It's
Yeah, we had no choice. I mean, we've got to evolve or die. So
yeah, but it's a question. It's a question. I always think that things. Yeah, I did an acronym because we have a lot of health-centered people, in Strategic Coach who are very innovative, and you're one of them. And the thing that I call there's you guys, the entrepreneurs and the creative collaborators, I call them, the
Mhm.
people. And I said, and that's one side of the equation, and then there's the other side of the equation, which I call DUMB, D-U-M-B, and it's disease management monopoly bureaucrats. And cure. Hold on here, I have to look that up in the dictionary. Cure,
Right.
no ongoing cash flow.
Yeah.
You get out of here, boy.
You're actually getting someone healthier? That's huh?
Yeah,
Yeah, you're not. Yeah,
cure.
that's that definition in Medicare. They consider if you're working to prevent disease, enhance the quality of life or prolong life, it's not considered medically necessary. So, so there you go. That's the
Yeah,
dumb acronym that you use.
dumb. I call it
The,
dumb. Yeah, and not dumb people, but a dumb system.
exactly.
A lot of great people, but they're in a dumb system.
Yeah. Yeah. And it gets really frustrating because the censorship that's going on in COVID, I mean, if anyone has a dissenting point of view, the fact that, hey, creating a vaccine to treat an RNA replicating virus is going to be almost impossible. It's going to mutate so quickly. They're still like, oh, no, screen that. Let's Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg and Larry Page are like, let's get that off Google and Facebook. And
Yeah. Well, I think Texas really has the best approach to this, and they have, I forget the official name of it, but if a patient agrees to go ahead with an experimental exercise, as a citizen of Texas, they have the right, if they sign a document, say that I'm basically, taking my own life in my own hands here, and therefore, if I have a doctor who, you know, someone to actually administer something that's not clinically proven or it's not clinically tested, you have the right to do that. And I think that's the solution to it all over the country.
Right.
You know, the the class action legal society won't like that, but
Not at all. Yeah. But I mean, Trump did sign the Right to Try Act. And so that gives us a little more flexibility. It was the Texas governor, I think it was House Bill 831 that he
yeah,
passed.
Perry, it was Perry when he was governor.
Perry. Yeah. And he was just so forward thinking.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. What's the insurance for medical practitioners? What's it? Errors and omissions or whatever it is.
Malpractice, yeah.
Yeah, malpractice in Texas, it's $10,000 per year. There's states where it's $300,000 a year,
Yeah.
$500,000.
Yeah, we're paying about 4 times that here in Utah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, awesome, Dan. Well, this has been fun, and I hope you have an amazing birthday on Tuesday.
Yeah, I'm actually doing 2 British events on Tuesday. So we have about 250 UK clients who do their workshops in London, and they never have me as their coach. So once a year, I take an afternoon and I just show them 2 or 3 thinking tools. So I'm doing it by Zoom this year. And then the next day we have marketing for, actually prospects. And we'll have a couple hundred UK entrepreneurs who have heard about Coach, and they've all filled in their mindset scorecard. They can't be told when the event is until we have their mindset scorecard. And then on Thursday, all the 10 times, everybody who's 10 times in Strategic Coach, we're going to have a virtual cocktail party. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So.
Well, fun. Well, this I'm excited, and I really appreciate your innovation because I love Strategic Coach, and anyone who's listening to this is looking for just a community of like-minded individuals. If you're someone who thinks outside of the box, Strategic Coach, there's no better community that I've ever found. So thanks for creating that, Dan, and look forward to seeing you very soon.
Yeah.
Virtually, anyways.
Yeah. Tell Dominic card tricks are the future.
Sure will.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Take care, Dan.
Okay.
Bye-bye.